Hey everyone, I hope you're well today, and it's a great privilege to be able to talk with you and introduce myself, tell you a little bit about what I do, my background, research and training. So I am a child neuropsychologist. I studied at King's College London at the Institute of Psychiatry in the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Prior to that, I obtained a Bachelor of Science, also in psychology, and a Master of Science, again in psychology. After my PhD in 2012, I decided to go to America to pursue a postdoctoral research role in the section of nutritional neurosciences, where I carried out neuroimaging research to look at the effects of omega-3 fats, which I'll be talking about a little later, in the brain activity of adults with ADHD. So I have worked in predominantly neurodevelopmental disorders, and I'll be explaining a little bit more about what they are exactly, but in a nutshell, I like to describe them as subtle differences in the wiring of the brain, which give rises to differences in behaviour and sometimes personality as well, but essentially differences in the way the brain functions. And sometimes there are subtle differences in the structure of the brain also in these individuals, which can be picked up during neuroimaging. So I am also a nutritionist under the category of science, and I am particularly interested in the role of what we call brain selective nutrients, so specific nutrients which help govern neurotransmission. And obviously neurotransmission is the process of cell signaling throughout our brain across our neuronal networks, which govern our everyday thoughts, feelings, behaviors and actions. So neurotransmission is obviously super important, and it is utterly reliant on certain nutrients, including omega-3 fats. And again, I'll be coming to that in just a while. So that's a little bit about my background and training, and I also lecture. So I lecture at the University of Surrey on their nutritional medicine programme. It's an excellent master's programme. And I also lecture in psychology at London Metropolitan University and have an honorary affiliate role at King's College London. So that's me in a nutshell. And you're probably wondering how I got into all of this, and that's a good question to ask, and it's one that I'm asked often, and it's a very, very long story. I won't have time to go into it all with you today, but in a nutshell, I I was a young first-time mum, busy working mum. I ran an estate agency in St John's Wood, Northwest 8, and my little boy was at a school just a couple of roads away. And when he was around 6 and 7, he was noticeably hyperactive, very inattentive, very restless, didn't seem to learn from the consequences of his actions, was always fidgety, distracted, as I said, very, very hyperactive, incredibly bright, lots of fun, boundless energy. And I started to receive a lot of complaints from the school about this kind of low-level disruptive behaviour, inability to kind of stay focused, stay on task. His attention had to be redirected kind of almost persistently throughout the day, and this drove his teachers wild, and they often accused him of misbehaving deliberately, because when he did complete a piece of work, the standard was normally quite high. So they were like, see, he can do it, he's doing it deliberately. But I knew intuitively that he wasn't. He was always so remorseful. He hated being, told off and reprimanded. And it caused him a lot of distress and anxiety, and it affected his self-esteem. And, he would ask me why he wasn't able to do a certain task, or what was wrong with him, he would ask, why was he getting into trouble all the time? and it caused me a lot of anxiety and worry. So that really was the reason I started like trying to find out what was going on. Obviously, I wanted help for my little boy, for our family situation. So I sought out help from, educational psychologists primarily, who went to observe him in school and during class time and in the playground. And I had several kind of educational psychologists, and eventually we were referred to CAMS. I also saw child and adolescent psychiatrists privately. Everyone had different opinions, but eventually he was diagnosed with mild dyslexia and ADHD. And this really made sense for me. It explained why he'd kind of almost become the kind of class clown at times, as a distraction away from his struggle, his internal struggle to be able to do the work. So that really kind of like started me out on a whole new life, if you like. I decided to give up my job in real estate, and it was just impossible to continue with that. And we took some time out, and I decided to eventually enroll in university as a mature student. I'd left school with, not many qualifications. I kind of didn't have that academic drive back then, but this kind of pursuit of wanting to know what was going on was the motivational driving force and inspiration behind why I decided to go to uni and retrain. And that journey was 14 years long. And with my son, we sought out so much help from nutritionists and dietitians and even, chiropractors. He had every allergy test under the sun. I also engaged him in as many activities as possible to stimulate him, because he was super bright. He did anything from drama and dance to trampolining, gymnastics, even boxing. And we also went down the kind of pharmacological route as well. I had one of the schools that he went to had sort of said to me, either you medicate him or you remove him from the school. And obviously I was extremely concerned about him getting an education, because obviously with these learning and behaviour differences, I knew that he was at risk of educational failure, which often these children are. So my hands were tied, and so we went down the whole methylphenidate, which is, a common psychostimulant medication given to these children. And that basically didn't really work for him either. Although he was better able to concentrate and pay attention in class, he was his appetite was suppressed, and his moods were very up and down. He was like an emotional roller coaster. So I had to withdraw him from medication, which also meant I was forcibly asked to remove him from school. So that was a major issue again. And a friend who worked in the nutraceutical arena contacted me, and she was like, hey, Rachel, have you tried omega-3 fatty acids? And I hadn't. I sort of really didn't know much about them at all. So we tried those, and after about a 6-week period, she phoned me up and she was like, how's it going? And I was like, well, actually, it hasn't really done much at all. And then she was saying, well, perhaps he has a nutritional insufficiency, which you need to correct in order for them to be of help. So we kind of upped the dose, and he was taking, I think, 1,000 milligrams a day. And then we started to notice a difference. And a lot of the research about omega-3 and ADHD had come out of America. There was nothing in the UK at all. So we weren't really sure whether these children with ADHD were just not receiving adequate amounts in their diet, or whether there was perhaps something a little bit more deeper going on, like impairments with absorption and synthesis of omega-3 into the red blood cells. But anyway, I learned through my training that the brain is the fattest organ in the body. So 65% of the dry weight of the adult brain and retina is made up of these complex, specialized and unique fats called lipids. And around 25% of all neuronal membranes, so all of your brain cells, are made up of a particular omega-3 called docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA. So if I break down the science really simply, it's estimated that we have about 100 billion neurons. And as I already mentioned, these are responsible for cell signaling. Well, each neuron is coated in a myelin sheath, which is made up of omega-3 DHA. And what this does is it acts as an insulator to speed up these chemical responses in the brain, making for kind of faster and more efficient cell signaling. The neuroscientist Professor John Stein at the University of Oxford has estimated that cell signaling is slowed down by about 30% in children who have insufficient levels of omega-3. And there's been some other research from Dr. Alex Richardson, also from the University of Oxford, during some of her studies, including the Doe Lab, showing that the average omega-3 index, so that's the sum of the two key highly unsaturated fatty acids that we need for brain function, EPA and DHA. So you add the percentage levels of those and they give you an omega-3 index. So she has shown that children in the UK, on average, their omega-3 index is 2.4, which is very low and considered suboptimal. So the range goes from 0 to 12. So 0 to 4 is suboptimal, 4 to 8 is intermediate, and 8 to 12 is optimal. So certainly supplementing my son with omega-3 made him noticeably less hyperactive, and in addition I noticed changes in his mood for the better. So he even kind of shared with me that he felt happier, and I didn't know until years later that omega-3 also plays a significant role in the regulation of what's called our serotonergic and dopaminergic systems in the brain. So dopamine is the hormone or neurotransmitter which governs our basically our motivation to do things, and it gives us the feeling of pleasure. So after eating a delicious meal or after exercising, we get dopamine, whereas serotonin is the neurotransmitter linked to more constant state of well-being and happiness. So both of these hormones can be manipulated in the human brain, and humans are master manipulators in terms of trying to regulate their own biochemistry. And what I'd noticed in my son in particular was that he would have sugar cravings, and of course sugar releases dopamine, so you get that little hit of dopamine, makes you feel good, makes you feel pleasurable, so of course you start getting sugar cravings. So this is quite common in children with ADHD and autism, is that oftentimes they're fussy eaters. They're choosing what I call the white food, so white bread, white pasta, white rice, or they'll just have like chicken nuggets or certain types of foods. They can be very fussy eaters. So what I did with my son was I cut out all sugar and all processed foods, and I literally started making every single meal from scratch, and I did an elimination diet with him over a period of time, and would slowly reintroduce foods after a period of abstinence, and that really worked. Plus I made sure that he had adequate intake of a range of nutrients that I knew helped neurotransmitter function. So some of these are, magnesium, zinc, selenium, iron, iodine, and all of these work synergistically with omega-3 to facilitate absorption of these nutrients into the body. And it's important to say as well that omega-3, so you've got the omega-3 family, and the head of the omega-3 family is alpha-linoleic acid, and that's a short-chain plant-based omega-3 that you can only get from eating certain nuts, seeds, green leafy vegetables. And alpha-linoleic acid doesn't readily convert into the two key highly unsaturated fatty acids, as I mentioned earlier, EPA and DHA. Therefore, a direct source is always recommended, and one of the most abundant sources of omega-3 is oily fish and seafood. So wild Alaskan salmon, that type of thing. So if children aren't eating fish and seafood, and many children, especially those of neurodevelopmental differences, they don't like, a lot of them don't like fish. They don't like perhaps the texture or the smell. So in those cases, they may have suboptimal levels of omega-3, which in turn is then going to have an effect on their brain function and their mood and behavior. We know the impact of omega-3 insufficiency by looking at cell culture studies, experimental studies in the laboratory where they have deprived neurons of omega-3, and that's resulted in significant differences of what's called neurite outgrowth. So on a neuron, it's like if you can imagine, like I should have a picture, but I don't have a picture for you, so I'll try and describe it in words as best as I can. So you have the cell body, and then you have these dendrites, which are long and spindly, if you like, almost like a tree-like pattern of branching. And the longer and more intricate these branches are, the faster the connection. So depriving hippocampal cell cultured neurons of omega-3 results in shorter, noticeably significant differences, but putting omega-3 back into the cell cultured hippocampal neurons results in the restoration of that neurite outgrowth. So the take home message is, I don't expect you to remember all that, but the take home message is that low omega-3 does have an effect on the brain's ability to communicate, to send messages, and also on mood. Healthy amounts of omega-3 keeps mood in check because it the mechanism of action is the regulation of dopamine. So that's kind of the take-home message. So because of my experience with my son, I was fascinated by ADHD and comorbid mental health conditions. And what I mean by comorbid is that ADHD often doesn't come along in terms of like having pure cases of ADHD or ADD. It's not normally just ADD. It often comes with reading and writing difficulties or dyspraxia, also known as developmental coordination disorder, which is a disorder of movement. These are often very clumsy children. Also dyslexia, especially in girls who present with the ADD type, that's attention deficit disorder without the hyperactivity and with less impulsivity. They are vulnerable to depression and anxiety. So I have worked in a range of mental health conditions, and my approach is a non-pharmacological approach. So for all those children who don't necessarily respond to medication, about 2/3 are thought to respond to medication, and that leaves a third who are potentially left untreated. So parents are often wanting to seek out other avenues, like what can they do? And changing the diet is really important. If anyone knows the work of Professor Robert Lustig, who in my mind is one of the first scientists to really go all guns blazing and wage the war against white refined sugar. You may have come across research that suggests that basically too much sugar can be toxic. His book Fat Chance breaks it down into great detail, and I read that book in 2010, and it really opened my eyes to the potentially harmful effects of sugar and how addictive it can be. And obviously too much sugar can lead to a condition called metabolic syndrome, which basically can put us at risk of type 2 diabetes, obviously obesity, and later in life can increase risk for, as I said, metabolic syndrome, which is the first kind of warning, if you like, in terms of risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke and more. And the World Health Organization, the WHO, which is always my go-to, has warned that by and large, these type of diseases are preventable. So we can prevent them by improving our diet. So it's really important for everyone, not just children, to think about what you're putting in your body and to understand that food is not just affecting the body. You know, nutrition affects the brain as well. And it's really important to really restrict your intake of processed foods, because what that does in terms of biochemically is it can release precursors, inflammatory precursors called prostanoids and leukotrienes, which can place the brain in a vulnerable state of inflammation. And there is a global consensus by those working in the field of nutritional psychiatry and nutritional neuroscience that underlying much of psychiatric illness is chronic inflammation in the body and the brain. So what you eat should not just be addressed from the neck down. It has to be thought of in terms of how it's affecting our mood, our everyday thoughts, behaviors and action. But the great thing is, we know also through neuroimaging research that you're not stuck with the brain you have. And through the process of neuroplasticity, we can actually change our brains, which is really super empowering in my mind. So, you know, conditions like depression can be helped via nutrition and exercise. You know, the body has its own natural antidepressants, such as endorphins, and making sure that you keep hydrated by drinking at least, 8 glasses of water every day, because that flushes toxins from the body and also helps with weight loss if you are overweight. You know, weight loss is 80% is nutrition. So all of this is really key to think about. Lots of exercise, healthy eating, restrict sugar. You know, instead of white refined sugar, the way I did it myself was that I switched. First of all, I went from white sugar to brown, like Demerara, so raw organic sugar. Then I eliminated that and I switched it for organic honey, and especially if you can have something like Manuka. I know it's expensive, but it can last for ages, and it's full of minerals as well. It's healthier. And then I would just literally like have a quarter of a teaspoon, and now I don't even eat sugar at all. Like even the taste of it makes me feel quite queasy. Switch milk chocolate with dark, which is full of flavonoids. It gives you that little dopamine hit, but naturally, without all the junk, because it's Keiko. Go for 70% or over. Make all your meals from scratch. If you want some inspiration and recipe ideas, head on over to nutritious_minds on Instagram, or look at my website, www.nutritiousmindsconsulting.com. I have a W1 clinic, which I run with an award-winning doctor and psychiatrist, Dr. Blue. We also have Lisa Nash, who does all the personal training and body coaching. And in addition to that, I set up a non-profit organization to help children with learning and behavior differences, to help cover the costs of diagnostic assessments. I have a network of some amazing clinical psychologists, educational psychologists that I work with. And we do lots of events, all centered around nutrition, wellness, fitness, inspirational stories of recovery, and triumph over adversity, which is something I'm really passionate about. I also have a website, which is drrachelvgao.com. This is loads of testimonials, stories from clients that I work with who have ADHD and other similar mental health difficulties. So yeah, what more can I tell you? So I have a book coming out, which is all about smart foods for brain function. Hopefully it's coming out at the end of this year. Just waiting to hear from the publisher on that. And also I have the results of my postdoctoral research study, which I'll tell you a little bit about. We recruited adults with ADHD, and we basically put them into the MRI machine, which is a magnetic resonance imaging, to scan their brain at baseline. So baseline means just pre any intervention. And then we randomized them in a double-blind fashion. So they didn't know which group they were in. The researcher, and all the research team didn't know which group they were in. They were randomly allocated to receive 3 grams of either omega-3, EPA and DHA, or a identical placebo for 16 weeks. Then we brought them back and we scanned their brain again. And what we did find were increases in the activation of the brain in specific regions associated with emotion and attention in the adults with ADHD taking the omega-3, whereas there were no changes in the placebo group. And that was conducted at the National Institutes of Health and is being prepared for publication, which is really exciting because it's the first study globally to show an effect of omega-3 in terms of brain activation in adults with ADHD. If you have any questions, I'd be really thrilled and happy to answer them. And yeah, I think I've said enough. And I want to wish you all a wonderful day. Stay positive, do some meditation, make sure you have a gratitude list, because I think it's really important right now in the current climate to stay positive. Focus on what you do have, like even if that's just a warm, comfortable bed, a delicious meal that you've cooked for yourself, 30 minutes of exercise. Like, be grateful for what we have and don't focus on lack. Keep that abundant mindset. And yeah, sending best wishes to each and every one of you. Thank you for your time. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions at all, please put a comment below. I will get back in touch with you, and connect with me on all my social media networks. Lots of love from Rachel, Nutritious Minds. Bye.